Gaze into the crystal ball, and you will see fragments of silicon.
Welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. I'm your host, Adam. Joining me, as always, is the regular crew. Let's get to the news. Let's see. Gauntlets, why don't you start us off this week?
Well, the weather has been cloudy and kind of unseasonably cool lately. So we've been continually having the struggle both at home and at work of I like it cool and no one else does, so please don't put on the fucking wood stove in the fucking May. Or please don't set the work heating system to on in May. Because the room I work in gets to be like 80 whenever that's on. One of my friends is actually graduating from college this coming weekend, and I'm not going to be able to be there, but I'm going to try to like Skype in, so that'll be interesting. It's a big occasion. I'm going to try and like take him out for dinner or something one of the next couple days. Video game wise, after the game reviews for last week, I ended up playing a bunch of Puyo Puyo Tetris because I kind of left that off in the middle. I'm still not actually very good at it, but it is fun. And also I'm looking forward to the Splatfest this coming weekend, which I'm actually still not sure what it's time travel versus teleportation, and honestly, those are like there's a significant overlap in those powers because you can't teleport without kind of time traveling, and you can't time travel without kind of teleporting. So it's hard for me to pick which, but I'm pretty heavily leaning time travel. And I also need to find some time to play the games for this coming weekend, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's about all I got.
Okay, my turn. So we've also been flip-flopping between cold and warm, and it's jarring. For Mother's Day this past Sunday, me and Mom went into town and just had a good time. We visited my grandparents' burials and left flowers at their tombstones. So what else? Well, they got the old road that I travel to work on half open now, finally. I thought there was supposed to be some legal issue over that, but I guess I'm not sure. But that's good. I don't have to take the 4-lane now, so the driving will be much more relaxing. In terms of gaming, I've been playing the games the one game for review this week, and also been playing Final Fantasy 3. And that's about it.
Okay. Petty, it's your go.
Not a lot has happened so far this week. Mostly it's been really hot and rainy, and because of the rain, the guys who messed up our yard still haven't come back yet. So that's fun. And not a whole lot really been doing in gaming. Like, I've been kind of playing a bit of Final Fantasy 15, and yeah, not really a whole lot going on. Just gonna be Monday showing Golix and Twilight how to work the new stream setup, so if they need to stream while I'm gone, that can be taken care of.
Hmm.
And
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay, my go. Let's see. Now the weather I've been dealing with is rain. Lots of rain. Like rainy season started up. So of course it's, muggy as fuck. I think is the technical
Well,
term.
I think in Florida you can like drink the air with a ladle at this point.
Thereabouts. Like, I mean, it's less worrying about hot to cold than more, how soggy does it feel in the outside / the room right now? Anyway, let's see. In other news, I guess it's breakdown season because, like also another item that needs replacing. Fortunately, it's the laptop. Like, if any of you have ever used a laptop, you know how laptop hinges work. Like, although I guess in this case it's less the actual hinges and it's the area around the hinges. Like, it's more like how this thing was designed. Like, the screen has been burying into the areas around the hinges. So now there's a big hole here and there, and it's gotten to the point where I can't. Last time I tried to open this thing, the case started separating. Like like right around where the power plug connects. Fortunately, it's like I don't have the requisite capital right now to get it replaced. That's looking more like a Christmas thing. I mean, thankfully, it still works. It's just, it has to stay upright now. So
Getting duct tape?
it is what it is. Like, and yeah, that's about it for the news this week. So merrily we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast. And this week we are welcoming Karl Nelson and David Nickerson of Mega Toast Games.
Hey, how's it going?
Well, it goes well.
Thanks for having us.
No problem, no problem. Especially given the short notice. Like,
Oh, we have no lives. It's all good.
Games are our lives.
Okay then. Well, right. So how we start things off is we'd like to get to know the people behind the games, the studio, what have you. And we like to start by asking, how did you get interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
Ooh, yeah, that's.
Where do you start?
I'll take the lead here, Karl.
Sounds good.
So Karl and I, first of all, have been working together for about 3 years now, off and on, making different protos. But my story kind of began when I was a kid, really, just playing lots of classic games. Well, nowadays they're classics. They were current games at that time. But yeah, just pretty much the same way most devs start out, just as gamers first, and then eventually made my way to want to make them myself, and learned some stuff in high school, and then went to some post-secondary for game art and design, and I did a stint on Grand Theft Auto 4 was my first game that I worked on in the industry. I was just a lowly environment artist on that, a team of over 1,000, so not that as impressive as it sounds.
It's awesome.
But,
He was the main guy.
Yeah, I created GTA. And then worked on some other lesser-known stuff, and kind of worked my way into the indie realm once I started learning a bit more that I could do on my own, and here we are, many protos and a few Steam releases later.
Yeah. Do you want me to go from here, Dave?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
You can tell a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I guess I started off, as Dave said, for himself. Got an Amiga when I was younger, and that was the best thing on the planet at the time, and as far as I was concerned. Got into that, and then I guess when I was in college, I don't know what you call it over here. High school is what you call it over here. Used to, tinker around with my own levels in Duke Nukem and Doom and Quake and so forth, and send them out to people. Of course, they always had hidden walls, so I'd always dominate anyone who played me on my own maps. And also used to play Command and Conquer, and you could modify certain files in Command and Conquer, so it changed all the gameplay and everything. And a couple of me and my mates, we used to hack around with that. But then I went to university, did a programming degree. Eventually ended up working at Microsoft on the Kinect launch titles. I did the website for the Kinect launch titles, connectshare.com, long gone now. So don't bother going to the actual address. We used to share photos and videos from the launch Kinect games to, and then you could share them onto social media after that. Worked on bringing UFC pay-per-views to the Xbox 360 and NFL on the Xbox One. Did a couple of other things there as well. And then eventually left Microsoft and started working with Dave, and we released 3 mobile games. Unfortunately, I had to go and get a full-time job, and now I'm working in the digital media filmmaking, I guess you'd say. With Unity, Digital Monarch Media is the division that I'm working in now. So I guess that's my background.
Okay. And how did you two meet?
Actually, Karl, you can. I actually don't remember what was the first time we met? I think we met actually at a bar from some mutual game industry friends.
Yeah, it was Blake's birthday party at the pool place. And
yeah, it was that. Okay, yeah. I remember it as the foosball place because they had a foosball table.
They've got food. Yeah, they've got several of them. Yeah. We mutual friends, and he was showing me his game that he was releasing on Steam later that year, which is Pixel Boy and the Ever Expanding Dungeon. And I was showing him some protos that I was working on, and we kind of were like, yeah, if things ever work out, maybe we'll work together. And both probably didn't think too much of it at the time.
Right. Oh yes, and then it kind of moved to the contracting stuff. So we were doing some stuff just to kind of keep the lights on and just farting around on some protos for a little while. I forgot to include that part in there.
Contracting work.
Yeah, it's a necessity unless you're one of the top dogs selling 10 million units,
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, unfortunately. But yeah, we I guess we kind of both managed to free up some time. Was about 2-3 years ago, and we started doing some, as Dave said, some contracts that we both, neither of us were too happy with.
Non-game industry stuff.
Non-game,
like it was, we were doing stuff we didn't want to do, obviously, but it was paying the bills. Yeah, but it then we went full time for
video games.
A little while after that, and that's when we got the mobiles in a roll, and then kind of went back to needing to make money again, and then got back to our Steam games, and then now we're finally getting Power Gunner out there.
Yeah,
it's taken us a while to be able to actually get it polished to the point where we're comfy releasing it and fix any issues that basically we're going to be stuck on because we're not a giant studio, so we can't exactly afford a ton of QA services like nonstop. So we're just getting friends to play it as many times as possible. So very much basement dev, but that's how you got to do it. So
so is it just the two of you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it's like not a surprise.
I mean,
you know,
we'd obviously love to have more, but
yeah, it's like
money.
it is a hard business right now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Given just all of the games that are being released, on the platforms these days. And indeed, looking at your website, I see before Power Gunner, and there's a game called Hyper Slasher, and you did some mobile games.
Yeah, we've released 3 games on mobile, so Red Light Runners is the best. Unfortunately, if you're looking on the website, it probably still has the Apple links, and unfortunately, I let the Apple, the $100 a year lapse recently, so I don't think they're on the Apple Store anymore.
Yeah, it was costing us more to keep it on the Apple Store than we were getting anything from it. So
paying $100 a year to get $2 was getting very hard to justify.
Yeah, definition of the of indie. So that is basically most of our endeavors are like that. But Red Light Runners was a full production. We got to do a full game on that one, and it was more in the free-to-play realm, which generally we're I don't know if I want to speak for Karl, but I'm generally against free-to-play games just because of the mentality around them. But it doesn't mean that they're all bad or anything. It just I'm not against free-to-play games. I shouldn't have said that. Because I made one, right? Like I'm more just saying it's an easy excuse to not try and do something creative with game design, and that's kind of what's important to me a lot of the time. Is like, it doesn't have to be the best executed game ever, but if there's something kind of cool there that like maybe hasn't been, it doesn't even have to have not been done before, but just in a new way. You're looking at something could even just be a different art style with a familiar genre, right?
And I mean, like, I could say it was really hard to design a free-to-play game without being greedy, because like you're there and you're like, okay, let's do this, and it's like, oh, but we're giving it away for free, and it's like, well, and it's not what we want. We don't like that mentality. It's you're like, well, you have to gate certain content, so that means people play it enough to watch the ads, and it's
Yeah, we tried each one of those kind of different strategies for different types of games. More so just because at some point you have to try and do some sort of business sustain if you really want to make that long-term game where it'll actually happen, because it's really hard to do a large scope game without any funding. And I mean, I know there is examples out there. It's just it's very tricky, like to keep it going for a long period of time. But if you keep the scope smaller, you have a better chance of having a finished product at the end of the day, and having something that you can play and be happy about, whether you're going in it to make a business out of it or not.
Indeed. I mean, more to the point, having a small scope allows you to get it out in a relatively quick amount of time.
Yeah.
We've had developers here, 2 people, 1 people, 3 people, who have spent literally years, like 3 to 5 years, working on one game.
Right.
So, scope is definitely important.
Definitely, yeah.
Because it's like what I've noticed from your games so far is they're pretty simple things. I'm not saying that's bad. It's just. Yeah. Your latest game here, Power Gunner, it's a riff on Lunar Lander.
Yeah, it's similar aspects to old Atari games for sure, and then kind of throwing in some shooter mechanics, which I don't like. I'm not saying it's unique in that aspect, but I can't think of any. So we weren't basing it on any other than the original floatiness of Lunar Lander, but that's definitely the one I would say, sure, was the beginning, maybe inspiration, and then it ended up being a shooter.
Yeah. Well, it's because Power Gunner here has actual Newtonian physics. Things like inertia are a thing.
Right.
And, you have to use propulsion to rise. It's not just move the controller up and you move that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. We definitely played with several different controller schemes. I mean, up until like a little while ago, it was just 2 buttons even. And I mean, I've got an advanced controller scheme, which also you can control the guns and fire the guns separately and all of that. But it just kind of completely changes all the balance and everything, as you can probably imagine.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
We've tried a few different things along the dev process there, and it. Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yep, that happened.
That was savage.
RNG generally hates me, so yeah.
RNG hates everyone sometimes at different points in time.
Hey, there's another thing. Often with the smaller scope games, you'll see it and you'll be like, okay, like where sometimes it almost feels like, what is the dev doing between the 1 week and the 4 week period? When it doesn't seem too much different, it's usually dealing with RNG stuff where it's like you test it 1,000 times and you find that one anomaly that you have to go back to the drawing board again and again. So it saves lots of time at the beginning, but like really it's like there's so many variables that it's quite a lot more than expected with RNG stuff.
Yeah, especially as this isn't you get hit once and you win or you lose. Certainly added in a lot more variables that we didn't ever anticipate. Complicated things if it was a one-hit death. And the camera still moves, unfortunately, there. Sorry, I just kind of noticed things. I don't know if you noticed. I mean, it kind of annoys me when I notice things.
Yeah, but I mean, that's part of one of the things is like, so watching other people play the game in a different way that we would play it as a smaller studio a lot of the time is like when we will find something, and sometimes it can be a more obvious bug or exploits are the thing that we spend generally the most time on for the two of us between like bugs and exploits, is because really you want to make sure that there isn't a super easy way to cheat the game or to find a way around it. But sometimes a few bugs squeak in, polished builds. Always, I think.
Always. Yeah, that would be definitely fair to say. Always.
Indeed. And where did the initial idea of Power Gunner here come from? Outside of the audience, like what compelled you to make a game of this nature?
I think we were both really, really angry with the contract work that we were doing at the time. If I recall correctly, we were like, this sucks. Yeah.
We weren't actually, you know what? That is actually where it came from. Like when it started was we were doing some web works that was like non-game stuff. And it was just frustration of not doing game dev at the time. And then we'd just come off those mobile games. Damn, that's the second time. Those meteors, they give you a heads up on the map, but after watching you do it, maybe we should have a vertical notification.
Oh, we could easily have a vertical notification, couldn't we? Yeah, we could.
But like you were saying, this might be one of those case things where it'll happen twice now and then won't happen 30 times in a row. So,
yeah.
But sorry, I got off track there. I was watching the gameplay.
Yeah, I think it was general frustration, and we really wanted to do a Steam game, and we were initially also planning on getting this released on mobile, but we just kind of, I'm not a big mobile game player, so it's hard for me to make a game. I play mobile games when I'm on the toilet. I like to call them, I'm taking a dump game or something. And I don't think there's a big market. Well, maybe there is a big market for it, but
Well, there's a giant market for it. It's just it's a lot harder for the smaller guys like us, unless we have some sort of notoriety or we any sort, like, we don't really have a platform because of the going from hobbyist to trying to take it serious, and then it's like we're not rich, so we can't like just make a game for 7 years and make it amazing. So we I mean, really it's that battle between being professionals but also still having to be okay with the balance between the two.
Yeah, not everyone can develop Owlboy.
No.
Yeah, exactly, right? I mean, it's just it's everybody has different yeah, exactly. That's
I mean,
example.
we do have like a larger game that we're working on in Hyper Slasher, but the problem that we've had with that one is it became a lot larger than we wanted, and it just gets really hard to finish something off like that and still be able to eat food. You can only eat ramen so much before you're like, man, I wouldn't mind having chicken.
Yeah, I mean, like, it sounds glamorous, but like at some point, you wake up and it's you've been doing it for a while, and you got to be realistic about some of the stuff. So like you eventually gotta start getting that income in.
We've heard on the show before.
Yeah, it's and in reality, we can't really complain that much. I mean, we're living a pretty amazing life, being able to.
Yeah, it's dope. We get to make games. Like, it is super dope. So don't take it that way, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're
we love
playing up the old woe is us.
Yeah, like
not our intention.
We're in this by choice. It's not like we're doing this because it's all we can do. We want to do this. It's it's a passion project, and we'd love to be able to make the games that we truly want to be able to make, but
Yeah, maybe one day.
Yeah, not complaining.
Well, I suppose along those lines, I mean, is Power Gunner a game you really wanted to make?
It definitely is. It's just we obviously have to at some point release the game because we've had a lot of unfinished protos that because of that excuse, you almost use it as an excuse not to finish the game. It's not necessarily a non-sell for smaller games. It's more just here's your ultimate goal is like that you'd be able to comfortably make a game over 5 years. It's just that in the realistic scenario, it's you always got to kind of cut some corners you're not happy with, I guess, is more what it's about. So It's like with Power Gunner, like, we're happy that we're able to get it to a finished point where we can continue making it better post-launch. And that's kind of where the games that are at on Steam right now is you can do that, and not necessarily like you have a finished game, but you can make the real game you want over 2 years after it has released, right? So so it's part of that same journey. So if you can make something that you can continue working on, that's another way of doing it. I think that's a better way of putting it, in case you're interpreting it the other way. I'm definitely happy about it, but I guess I should for Karl as well. But
no, I actually really dig it. Even when we first started doing the prototypes, I was like, yeah, this is fun. Now, is it a game that I would pay $60 for? No. Like you got to set the expectations of where it's at. I mean,
it's like playing an arcade game, right? Like putting, having a smaller play on an arcade game, and we appropriated it price point wise. So yeah.
And I mean, Dave and I, we've been obviously giving out, Steam keys to people, to streamers like yourself, and to other people. And we actually got a streamer who's got cerebral palsy play it. And so he's been just playing it with his chin and a mouse. And, like, that was something that I guess I can't really speak for Dave here, but for me it was something that we...
for sure. It's truly like special with like you get that feeling that you would get on a big release, because it's going to somebody who maybe can't play every game out there. So it was like we got to do something special in that way, the same way as like a big scope game would be super special.
Yeah, and it really, really hit home. I mean, it's just really, really, I don't know. It was something that I didn't expect, and really happy that we actually got to, hopefully bring some, joy. Don't know if that's coming out right. It kind of sounds stupid, but hopefully it makes sense.
I think we got it.
Honestly, that's not really a talked about thing. Just in general, disabled people playing games.
Yeah.
Until very recently, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a lot of games that have questionable disability accessibility options.
It's true, sadly. Yeah.
It's good to see being worked on at all.
Yeah. I've actually, I noticed that Microsoft's doing a big push in the accessibility realm, and I think that's fantastic. It's
we actually put in extra development work, not in Power Gunner. We just put the full controller display, and it's as a simpler game, so we knew more people would play it just in general, because it's more accessible to less controls, similar to how mobile games are easier for people to pick up and play because they're often one touch. Right. But we made that Color Boost game, since it was a very color-centric game, we made it colorblind friendly as well. So yeah, I mean, it just even if at the end of the day it's helping one extra person have the experience that everyone else gets, it's worth it for that reason, right? And I mean, man, I keep coming back to the smaller scope thing, but yeah, that literally is the perfect explanation for things like that. It can come down to that as opposed to having that experience for 1 million or 10 million people, right? So it really is special. Like when you release something, even if it's a smaller scope game, like it is. So
yeah. And I mean, we've got Hyper Slasher, and which Dave and I both absolutely love and really want to get it out, but it's not going to get to that market, which now kind of makes me think a little bit differently about it, which is kind of weird, but it's, I don't know.
Hey, survival mode is accessible.
Oh, you've got a good point there. I hadn't thought about that. That's a very good point. Oh, we should totally make that more accessible.
Yeah.
Oh,
but
good idea.
I do think that's pretty good by Microsoft. Have you guys heard any more on that stuff?
What, the Microsoft controller?
Yeah, anything
that,
recently?
Honestly, not been paying too much attention in that direction. At least I'd imagine if Microsoft's going to have something more on that, it's probably going to be at E3.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to be at E3, which is something they have up on Sony, so they must have something to announce.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, big rumors are obviously the next consoles are all supposed to be coming out this year, right? Or announced this year. I could be wrong there. I have no inside information despite my Microsoft past.
I'm like, well, even if you did, it would not be a good idea to announce it on this program.
It's announced. It's coming out this year.
We've had
send
people
it to my bank
that.
info.
Yeah, it's
pre-order now.
It's called the Xbox 4.
Give you a bank, no.
Breaking NDAs are no joke.
No, yeah, I know nothing about that.
Yeah, definitely.
Anymore.
That's why we're laughing. He's just being a silly, awkward guy.
It's been 3-4 years since I worked there, so I'm well out of the loop. Fair.
So we've talked a lot about development time. How long have you spent on the development of Power Gunner here?
That's a tough one because it started off as a proto a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a mobile game originally. Like that's how you did ask us that question, so there's the answer to that question.
But we never released it on mobile for clarification.
We converted it to a PC game. No one ever saw it as the mobile game, so we kind of made it twice. So from the PC build, I would say between 3 and 6 months, possibly.
Yeah, I'd say that.
That's us ballparking because we were also working on other projects over different periods of time. So I'm just approximating.
Yeah, Dave's released a solo game on Steam, Warp Glider. You released that, was that December, I believe?
Yeah, December 14th. That came out. Thanks for plugging my game.
Nope. I had nothing to do with it, so I don't get any money from it. So we've been working on other projects at the same time as well, and unfortunately, as I say, I had to take a full-time job because, well, my girlfriend was starting to make it, so you know how they are.
You don't need to explain. We went over it.
Ramen.
So yeah, you guys got any other questions?
I'll see if my colleagues do.
All right.
I don't have any.
I don't either.
I've been entertained watching the game being played, but
As have I, and I think Karl's having a panic attack about the camera bug.
Not so much. I mean, I think we can fix it pretty easily.
Yeah, we'll fix that before Friday. So anyone seeing that, that's going to be fixed.
Man, I'm pretty happy with it though overall. One thing we should say is that we are going for the $1 mark for this release. Just because we're, part of it is to build up a little bit of a fan base, and part of it is, well, I don't know, it's a part of the Steam market that, a lot of the time $1 games are. So there's a lot of not very good $1 games.
No.
And
it's another accessibility option essentially.
Yes,
yeah, like I don't know how it keeps coming back to this, but it essentially is where a lot of those decisions get made. Is how many people can we actually get this out to that will want to play this, and what are we happy with most importantly, because I mean that's kind of the key to us being indie, right? So
yeah.
There's a audience member in the chat asking, when is Hyper Slasher going to be released?
Well,
Karl,
it's all on me. I can't sell Dave out on this one. I mean, Dave's been really useless. He's not doing a thing. It's all on me. The long and short of it is
soon. Just all you gotta say is soon. It'll come out hopefully this year.
Oh, yeah, hopefully this year. It's definitely the goal is to get it out this year. I've just been having some technical problemes. There's a couple of areas around the networking that I don't know everything on. I'd love to say I do know everything.
Multiplayer stuff, when you're doing big scope, multiplayer is hard. So it's taken us a lot longer than we originally anticipated, because we went from local to changing it to be full online. So we bit off a lot. So we're doing the long-term push to get that one done.
Yeah, and so hopefully, this year. I mean, I'm pretty optimistic I can get it all done this year. It's just, unfortunately, I've got a little bit less time than I used to. But I'm hoping that
I'm on him. It's getting out this year. All right?
He's bugging me. He's like, "Come on, Karl, where's Hyper?" And I'm like, "Yes, Dave."
It's honestly it's pretty close, but the infrastructure really is important. So like, and Karl, like, he's underselling himself. Like, you got to be top notch to actually release like you got to make sure that stuff is perfectly tight on your network infrastructure side. So like,
yeah, we don't want to release it.
It's hard.
We don't want to release it and then, like, everyone's like, "Oh, I'm trying to get online and nothing's working," and it's like you know, we really don't want that horrible experience, and
Yeah.
we really want it so it's quite a
We've
seamless.
been on that side, right? Like, so we don't want to do that to other people. So like, if they, but we're both like super hype about Rock and Power Gunner for now, because it's like we don't have the network infrastructure time, so we invested the time to try and get Power Gunner out, because it's just it was a little easier at the point we were at, and we kind of had both games closer to finish, but Hyper Slasher obviously is a larger scope than Power Gunner. We're not sure on the price point of that one either yet, so like, but we will obviously let people know as soon as we are comfy with having, you know, some keys sent out. And
yeah, we'll make sure to let you guys know as well, of course. You guys, we'll and hopefully you'll be able to play it all against each other at the same time. I mean, that'll be some pretty cool.
Awesome.
We love it as well. Especially I love teabagging opponents. That's my favorite part of the game. But that's
Pixels.
That's another story. Pixels.
All right then. The game is Power Gunner. It's coming out on Friday. I believe it's retailing for $1.
Yeah, it'll be 99 cents USD, and we will have a sale discount that you'll be able to preview on the page.
Okay. Is it only for Windows, or is there a Mac and Linux version as well?
There is a Mac and Linux version for this, so it's launching on all three. It should work on 32-bit operating systems as well as 64-bit. But I can't
simultaneous.
Yeah,
yes.
Everything's coming out on Friday, 10 a.m. PST, so 1 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah.
I can do math.
All right, Penny, play us to the next segment. Welcome to the topic of discussion. Let's see. This week we are talking about Final Fantasy III. We're talking about this in conjunction with the Final Fantasy VII remake reemerging last week. You might think that a bit odd, but it's like, okay, first of all, the thing that got shown at the State of Play was a teaser for E3, so.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about the Final Fantasy VII remake until we have more than, like, almost all cutscene stuff and stuff from pretty dang early in the game.
Yeah, stuff from the first disc.
And it makes sense to talk about the, maybe not first time Square ever remade a Final Fantasy game, but I think that Final Fantasy III was, like, the first time that they did from the ground up remake.
And it was with the game that probably needed it the most out of any of their games. The only other competition would maybe be 2, which has not yet been done.
Well, it's like 2 has gotten a number of remakes. It's just both Final Fantasy 1 and 2. They've never gotten the. I suppose the complete overhaul.
They've never gotten a full recreation. Because
I suppose the closest was Dawn of Souls, but I think
and Dawn of Souls did do a lot to patch out some of the dumber stuff in Final Fantasy II.
But that's still not the extent of Final Fantasy III, like literally remade, as in they made it polygonal. Like when they brought Final Fantasy III to the DS. This is the first time that Final Fantasy III had ever been remade, and they decided to make use of the 3D capabilities of the DS, such as they were. Like, it's like, and as a consequence, the 3D stuff in Final Fantasy III, doesn't look too hot, especially at higher resolutions. Because, this is stuff that was made to fill a DS screen. Mm-hmm. Like, that being said, subsequent versions, because yeah, Final Fantasy III has actually been ported quite a bit since the DS version, but it's worth noting that every single version after is based off of the DS version. The DS version has become the version.
Because wasn't the original kind of janky as crap?
The original was very, very. It had like as much story as Final Fantasy 1 or less, and used pretty much the same mechanical system and visuals. Where your sprite when you're on the world map is teeny, teeny, tiny. You have a side view against a black background with the player characters on one side and enemy sprites much larger on the other side. Everything is in like 4-color sprites because it's the NES. I don't think there's even a background. Like, there might be like a little thing at the top of the screen when you're in battle to say what kind of area you're in or something.
But you know, it's like more to the point. I think Square felt that, you know, Final Fantasy III was just too ancient to, you know, do the typical updated re-release. Because keep in mind, you know, like Final Fantasy 1 and 2, and to another extent Final Fantasy 4, they've had like versions building upon versions building upon versions. Now, it's like, you know, like Dawn of Souls, that built off of the PlayStation version.
Whereas Final Fantasy 3 wasn't redone like that. But, well, here's another reason probably why they wanted to redo it. Final Fantasy 3, I think, was the last significant Final Fantasy game that wasn't an MMO to not have, like, playable characters. Like, playable characters that are characters. You play as 4 Onion kids whose default color palettes are different colors. But otherwise, you name them and they have no character, and everything about them is completely incidental except as vessels for the jobs that you get out of crystals over the course of the game. Yeah. This is the first game that had the job system where a character could change classes, like, freely, sort of.
Yeah, I was about to say somewhat freely.
And when they did it again in 5, you will notice that they gave the 4 characters that you play as, like, names and characters outside of what job they are at the moment.
Yeah, this is another thing I think that really separates the Final Fantasy III remake from other, you know, updated re-release, remasterings, whatever you want to call them, because Final Fantasy III fundamentally changed a lot of stuff. Like, not just like mechanics, because mechanics got changed as well. Because of the polygonal design, you could only have a certain amount of enemies on the battlefield. Something that actually did get rectified in the full-on Final Fantasy IV DS remake. Like, they found a way to overcome that and to have, you know, like the amount of enemies that they had in the original Final Fantasy IV. But for Final Fantasy III, they could only show up to 3 monsters at a time. So what they had to do is they had to make them tougher.
Yeah, completely rebalance the difficulty of the individual. Because in the NES Final Fantasies, you would fairly regularly come up with, like, oh no, 6 goblins attacked, or 9 bombs attacked. I don't think anything goes higher than 9, but
9 was the max amount.
But you could get very large numbers of enemies, and therefore the attrition would be based on wiping out some of the weaker ones. But when you only have, when you only can do 3 character models instead of like 9 sprites, you have to rebalance the difficulty and experience gains and stuff from every enemy.
Yeah. And it's especially to note this stuff because the Final Fantasy VII remake is going to be changing stuff. We don't know what yet, but they've already said it's not going to be 1-to-1. And, you know, it's important to look at something like Final Fantasy III because, you know, now they've changed encounters. I suppose the one thing we do know with Final Fantasy VII is it's real-time combat now instead of turn-based. And that is the strange thing about Final Fantasy III. for as much as they changed, a lot of stuff is still the same. At least, they stuck to the original style. Like transitions, going in and out of buildings, still has the NES warp effect, for lack of a better term.
And they didn't decide to go ahead and add in save points because Final Fantasy IV on the SNES was the first Final Fantasy that had, like, I think was the first. It might not have even been that one. Might have been 5. Anyway,
it was 4.
It was 4. Okay, that had save points in dungeons and towns. In the NES ones, you can only save when you are on the world map.
Right. And of course, that led to issues. Like, because Final Fantasy III is pretty infamous for its final dungeon. Like, generally considered to be to have, one of, if not the worst final dungeon in a Final Fantasy game.
It is extremely long, and there are like 5 or 6 boss fights in it.
Yeah, the Crystal Tower is just a notorious slog. Coupled with the lack of saving, and it's just like full on, not even really worth playing the game past that point. Like, the remake doesn't mitigate that for the most part because they don't have the save points. Like, other things to keep in mind with Final Fantasy III specifically, they got weird with some of the items. For example, Phoenix Downs. You cannot buy Phoenix Downs. You can only find them or steal them.
So your number of times you can bring a party member back from the dead without going to a town with a church is limited.
Yeah, and also worth to keep in mind is Final Fantasy III is the last Final Fantasy to have the old magic system. The
D&D-esque magic system.
Well, 2 didn't have it either, I don't think, but that's because 2 did magic.
I'm not talking about 2. I said this was the last one to have.
Right. But yeah, 1 and 3 have a Dungeons and Dragons-esque Vancian-style magic system where magic comes in 8 or 9 levels, and you have a number of spell slots for each of those spell levels. So you can only cast 8th, even when you know Flare, which is an 8th level spell, you can only cast it like 3 times, and then you have to cast weaker spells. Right. Even the Dawn of Souls remake of Final Fantasy I switched it to an MP system, and even when the higher level ones cost a lot more, the ability to use all of your magic points on higher level spells makes you significantly more powerful than when you have a limitation of having to spread out your use between power levels.
Yeah, I have to admit, this is an unusual one because, once again, they went and rebalanced everything. Now, so they easily could have switched over to, the newer magic point system and recentered all of the magic around that without having another Dawn of Souls on their hands. But they didn't. And, this is some of the cases where the remake stuck too closely to the old conventions to its detriment. Because, I'll be honest, I don't like Final Fantasy III that much. I managed to beat the game back in the day, but, I had to force myself at points because it's not just a final dungeon. This game does stupid shit at other points. It employs gimmicks that it didn't really employ anywhere else in the Final Fantasy series, like the mini dungeons. I know some crazy people like this shit. I hate them. I also hate the gimmick bosses. And what those are is certain enemies, certain enemy bosses can only be beaten with a specific class.
Shout out to Garuda.
So I hope you don't mind, wiping and oops, I'll come back with the right thing.
Yeah. I'm like, it's like, that stuff was that's artificial difficulty of the highest order. especially the gimmick bosses. There's no real reason to have that other than, hey, we want to make the scholar have a use in this game.
Yeah, the scholar, the job system got a significant tweak to make it less janky in the remake. In the first one, this was the first game where you had an actual job system instead of just having like either a set job or like a choice of a few things at the beginning of the game. But while they had a lot of jobs, there are still a couple of things that later versions, especially starting with 5, would do away with, such as including from 1 jobs that are just straight upgrades to other jobs.
Yeah.
Jobs that don't do much, like the aforementioned Scholar, which equips shit all for weapons, and I think its only significant ability is the ability to tell enemy weaknesses, which can be a little useful, but not useful enough to not have a white mage in your party, for example.
Right. It's like there's already a thing that handles this, and it's called the Libra spell.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yep.
it's a totally pointless job that is only like they have it used, for 1 boss fight, and it's still all not that useful.
There were also 2 versions of the Summoner class. The Conjurer, which you get reasonably early, and the Summoner. Now, when you summon a monster, there are 3 different things that can happen. The Conjurer gets 2 of those, and they're both terrible, and the Summoner gets 1 of them, and it's good.
Right.
Like, I'm not kidding. The Conjurer's abilities are, like, really, really bad.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, this is also where the Bard job class makes its debut. Like, and, it's just as shitty as ever. Like,
the Bard is lucky if it gets the ability to actually hide.
yes. Like, so, and another caveat on the job system is they made switching jobs a literal pain. It's like if you switch a job, you have to spend a number of battles getting used to the new job. And that number changes depending on which job. Like, jobs that are like switching from a warrior to a knight, not too many not too many battles, maybe 1, 2, as opposed to switching from a knight to a white mage. It's going to take like 6 battles.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Which,
all
I mean, kind of makes sense, but is not very user-friendly.
Well,
Yeah,
what
it's
also
like,
doesn't
you
really
can-
make sense is that still occurs if you've used that job before.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, it's like you can see where. This is the rough draft version of the job system.
Yeah.
It's
Seriously, this game still had the separate, like, red mage and, like, I think there was a straight up, like, better red mage. There was a black mage and a straight up better black mage. There was a white mage, and this is where the black mage with the poofy pants and the white mage with the cat ears came from.
right.
Yeah, I guess these are like proto job advancement type things back in the day, but you could still switch to the worst job.
Right. And then in the NES version, near the end of the game, you unlock the Sage and the Ninja, and then the Sage can use all the spells, and the Ninja can use all of the weapons and armor.
Yeah, and
And in the remake, they're still by far the best jobs, but they, like, nerfed them a little bit. Like, I think the Sage is slow, and the Ninja, it doesn't get everything, but they're still, like, really good.
Yeah, but still, there were some good ideas here, but it's part of the reasons why I've never been able to really get into Final Fantasy III. Like, playing it again for this retrospective, I was reminded, there's a lot of bullshit here, a lot of bullshit that newer Final Fantasy games fixed. Like, I know there are people who claim Final Fantasy III is their favorite Final Fantasy. I just stare blankly because I don't know how you could put this game above, say, Final Fantasy V. Like, in terms of like just the job system, Final Fantasy V just got it right. It got rid of the stupid punishment system. It made the job classes better. It got rid of advancement classes.
Yeah, it got rid of redundant jobs, and it made it so that you can equip, once you've mastered certain abilities on a job, you can equip them on other jobs, giving you like actual versatility in what your characters have equipped.
Hooray for cross class.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and it also gave you job mastery. Like,
which when you mastered a job, I believe your base class gets like all of the non-action abilities from that job,
among other things.
Yeah.
It's like, but yeah, it's like Final Fantasy V just really was the culmination of the job system in terms of mainline Final Fantasies. It's like the next Final Fantasy game that made use of the job system after 5 was Tactics.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
yeah, other games have talking about the job system is like when you have like jobs that you can change between and unlock and stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's also 14, but its job system is rather unique.
Well, yeah, 14.
Well, for that, in 12 even, you kind of get like or at least in the international version or whatever, you get like a job overlay on a character's basic abilities.
10-2 had a job-esque system.
Yeah, 10-2 actually had a lot of really fun job with the dress sphere thing.
Well, even going throughout, there are some characters that still kind of personified a specific job, but they couldn't
always
change.
Have that, but we're talking about specifically games in which characters can change jobs.
Yeah.
Because even in Final Fantasy VI, all of the characters have a job, and about half of them are like traditional Final Fantasy jobs. In Final Fantasy, 7 and 8 really don't, because characters are pretty much completely dependent on what they have equipped for materia or guardian forces. But 9, all of the characters are pretty much in a class.
Mm-hmm.
10. Sphere Grid makes it a little bit less set, but everybody starts in an area that's kind of like a class. And then the MMOs obviously have jobs. But yeah, it found its home. It found a really solid home in a lot of the tactics games and stuff like that, where it's an easy way to customize your characters or whole team.
And shifting away from the job system, the plot. That's the other thing that really, really changed. Well, maybe not so much the plot, but characters, as in Final Fantasy III has them now.
Final Fantasy III, the NES version, did have a few NPCs that were significant characters, including a Princess Sarah, just like the one in the first game, with the unique note that they actually temporarily joined your party and were actually like available in battle.
Kind of.
I don't think you controlled them, but they were like there.
Yeah, they were random in what they did.
But yeah, they gave the 4 kids who start out as freelancers now rather than Onion Knights, but they gave them like names and characters and established that one of them is in fact a girl.
Gasp.
And they have now names and backstories and wants and needs and all the basic things a character would have. And when I say basic, I do mean basic. I mean, even though we do have characters now, they're not especially well developed. Mind you, that was always kind of a thing with the odd-numbered Final Fantasies. Like, going back with the old school Final Fantasies, the odd number, were considered the job games, heavy on the mechanics, heavy on the system, not so heavy on the
first out of the first 3,
6.
6, yeah.
And then 2, 4, and 6, they're considered to be the plot and character heavy ones. You compare the plots of Final Fantasy 3 or 5 to 4, and it's like no pun intended, night and day.
Mm-hmm. Although the plot in Final Fantasy III is at least a little bit of an even in the original, is at least a little bit of an interesting twist on the original, because on like the first Final Fantasy game, because you're still playing as the 4 Warriors of Light, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out in this game that there are also Warriors of Dark, and they're not evil, and the world actually needs there to be, like, balance, instead of just, like, you're good and everybody else is bad.
Right, it's like it's an actual balance of light and dark, not, light and dark being good and evil, because, honestly, a balance of good and evil that doesn't make fucking sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh no, you've got too much good in the world. The fuck? Like,
yeah,
that's why
it's kind of boring. I guess it depends on whether you assume good is also lawful.
I'm like, we're not talking about law versus chaos.
I know.
That's actually a separate argument. Even D&D has that separate.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
In most versions.
Anyway, the point is, Final Fantasy III for the DS has characters now, but I won't lie, you're probably not going to get invested in them, like that, as they are pretty basic, like, and they've got personalities now, but Ark and Lunith are no, say, Cecil or Terra, among other Final Fantasy characters and protagonists.
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
when you're upgrading from Onion Kid number 3, you can have a significant. You can still have a significant upgrade without actually going very high.
Yes. Another thing to mention is the airships in this game. This may be the Final Fantasy with the most of them. Like, let's see, there's the first one that gets destroyed pretty quickly. There's the second one that gets destroyed pretty quickly. Like, there's the third one, which actually is the Nautilus, if I'm remembering correctly.
Which is also a boat or submarine, I think.
Yeah, submarine. And there is the Invincible, the grand airship that allows you to fly over mountains and is really slow. Like, thinking about it, I think that puts it above Final Fantasy IV, which had 3 airships. Right.
Let me check. I mean, like, if we're talking about the earlier games.
Yeah. Let's see. So we talked about the heroes. Now the villains, sadly, they didn't get any sort of upgrade. Xande, the ostensible bad guy that you learn early in the game, you do not interact with him until about when you encounter him in his fucking in the Crystal Tower.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you're more or less aware of each other, like, through the late game, but it's like no actual personal interactions with the heroes or anything until, this is another thing that Final Fantasy IV did better, or even 2, having their antagonists be, interesting.
Be antagonizing?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I mean, and that being said, I think this was the game for the Final Fantasy series that introduced the man behind the man, so to speak, even though in this case it's a woman.
Well, it's a cloud that looks like a woman.
Well, actually, they actually made her gender official, I believe, via Dissidia.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely looks female, at least.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like.
But the Cloud of Darkness did not have a whole ton of character, really.
Yeah, the Cloud of Darkness is, really is a giant space flea out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, or rather, it's it's the pretty typical especially early JRPG trope of, the personification of the ultimate evil. Now,
The evil.
it's actually kind of a step forward that they, in the sense that they gave her, a tangible identity, which once again is actually kind of odd considering it's a cloud.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that being said, as a final boss, she's absolutely goddamn awful.
Yeah.
Because she's got one attack, she will spam it endlessly. It's an AoE attack, and it takes 2,000 points of damage.
Good luck, Godspeed, don't die.
Yeah, hope you brought a healer that can heal your whole party for that every turn.
Yeah, it's like, you're probably going to be wanting to bring at least 2 sages to this. And this is another reason why the finale of Final Fantasy III is considered to be such a goddamn slog. It's because you've got to grind and grind and grind to just make sure you're statted enough to survive that shit on a regular basis.
Also, you need to make it out to save.
Yeah. One interesting thing about the PC release here is it went a step further with its quick saves. Like, anytime you do an encounter, it'll quick save. Like, which means you can theoretically cancel a battle before you lose or something, and it won't take place. I use this to eliminate back attacks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, overall, Final Fantasy III is an okay RPG. It's an okay Final Fantasy game, but I just can't get over the fact that, there are better Final Fantasy games here. Like, really the entire 16 bits, I think, trumps Final Fantasy III handily.
I mean, I think that the main interest in Final Fantasy III is just as a historical curiosity of what the series was like earlier on.
Yeah, it set up everything that would come, pretty much.
Yeah, and it does give us insight into what might be happening with Final Fantasy VII. Like, they're going the big change mechanically in that remake is going to be going from turn-based to real-time.
Well, ATB, but yeah.
Well, the original one was ATB.
Well, yeah, that's
Like,
one of those.
They're going to a more visually and interactively dynamic combat system.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, they're going to have to deal with how all that works, and what sort of story overhaul the game is going to be getting. Because it's worth noting that Final Fantasy VII was fucking horribly translated.
and yet some of the horrible translations are looked upon favorably by some fans.
That's just nostalgia talking. I mean, did you know Sephiroth isn't an enemy in this game? It's like, no, Sephiroth is actually dead. It's Genova. Genova took over his body, but you don't know that because the fucking translation didn't tell you that.
Yeah, it's the stuff that people actually like is some of the weirder lines.
Right. That's fine.
No, Final Fantasy VII was still very much in the era where they had to trim a shit ton of dialogue down to get the script size to fit in English on the disc. And then also the people translating it just weren't very good at their jobs.
Yeah, it's more, here's the thing. What happened is Square got rid of their seasoned translation team from the 16-bit era when they left Redmond and head down to fucking LA. I'm like, so as a consequence, Sony picked up the translation of Final Fantasy VII. And oh god, if you've ever played any of their other translated works, that's in line with the other translated works. It wasn't just Final Fantasy VII that was a bad translation. It was Star Ocean, it was Grandia as well. Those were god-awful. and I am glad that shit's dead and buried.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Yeah, at least the bad translations in Final Fantasies like 4 and 6 or 2 and 3 were entertaining, and they still generally got the point across.
right. Anyway, so final thoughts on Final Fantasy 3.
It's a video game you can go buy on Steam right now.
Yes,
I
yeah.
kind of said mine already. It's neat as a like historical thing in the series, and could potentially be useful to see how they might remake other things. But as an actual game, most of the other Final Fantasy games are definitely better.
I mean, it's not the worst. Final Fantasy 2 exists. Final Fantasy 8 exists.
I'm not
Yeah.
even sure if 8.
8
We'll get into the problems. 8 has problems, and one of the big problems is that the most optimal way of playing it is extremely unfun.
Yeah,
But
it's like good ideas, but like Final Fantasy 2, it's like, oh god, that needs a full-on remake to make all the bad go away.
but like
Yep.
the keyword system in Final Fantasy 2 was pretty clever. Not
Yeah,
necessarily used well, but neat.
yeah. Anyway, so that'll about do it for Final Fantasy 3, and that'll about do it for this program. So coming up on the week ahead, we have a Friday show, as mentioned on Sunday, and as far as I know, that's still on track. Once again, these things are on track until they're not. We've had enough last-minute cancellation for that to be true. But happening Friday, May 17th at 9 p.m., we'll be having Kenny Lennon of Arc System Works USA. We're going to be talking about Kill la Kill IF. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are as well. And coming up on the Sunday reviews, we'll be reviewing One Finger Death Punch 2, Power Gunner, and Eternity the Last Unicorn. So, until Friday evening, I shall wish you good gaming.